Welcome to the Fat Tony's Podcast, where we bridge the gap between everyday life and expert insight. Join us in conversation with real-world experts, gaining practical advice and strategies to navigate the complexities of the modern world.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Fat Tony's Podcast. Our guest today is an infamous hacker who goes by the handle of Gummo. Throughout their career, they've hacked satellite encryption, worked for and against governments, built a supercomputer to mine over 180,000 Bitcoin back before most people had ever even heard of Bitcoin, and most recently have turned their attention to the possibilities and potential of quantum computing. Since their interview on the YouTube channel Soft White Underbelly went viral a few years back, Gummo has become part internet legend and part urban folk hero. Having gotten to know Gummo a little bit over the last few years, I'd just like to set the record straight and say that they're one of the most wonderfully kind-hearted and genuine people you could ever hope to meet. So with that, Gummo, welcome to Fat Tony's. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's wonderful to be doing an interview after so many years of not choosing to do one. So thank you for having me.
Well, I hope it's a good one for you. I think I always say let's start at the start. And I think an obvious first question is, for those listeners not familiar with yourselves, tell us a little bit about you, how you got into hacking and your journey into that world.
Sure. So I started hacking in the mid 80s, around 1986. It was becoming a hacker wasn't something that I actually set out to do. As a child growing up, I actually chose to enter into the clergy. But of course, my mother passed away and I really just lost my faith. And then I was, 13 years old. I'm trying to figure out how to take care of myself because I had no one. And so I turned to the thing that I knew the best was my computer. And I started learning how to manipulate technology for financial gain. And it wasn't for fun. It was to take care of myself. And so I would learn how to spoof credit cards using a Bell and Howell language master from the late 70s. I would use mail drops. I would use social security number generators for instant credit. I would also use fake documentation so I could obtain an apartment, so I could live somewhere. And then it just kind of went from there. The things that I learned were things that sustained me, that gave me somewhat of a normal life. Like, most kids are, at that age, right? Most kids are, the biggest problem they're worried about is who their next girlfriend or what, the pimples are there on their face. I was more concerned with, surviving and having a place to sleep and something to eat every night. And how do I get from point A to point B without having a driver's license or a car? So becoming a hacker was born out of necessity, sheer necessity to stay alive as a kid.
Those early experiences, you mentioned becoming a hacker out of necessity. I know a lot of hackers don't go through that journey. They go through it out of intellectual curiosity or teenage rebellion or things like that. Those early experiences, has that shaped your perception going forward about privacy and personal security today?
It has not shaped my perception of privacy and individual freedoms. I believe that I've actually bore witness to the erosion of loss of privacy and individual privacy and security through governments and their tactics that governments use to force masses into types of technology to be self-tracking, such as mobile phones, et cetera. So yeah, it's a unique perspective, but I believe that we as a general species, not a society or government or country, I believe that all humans have surrendered their expectation of privacy for convenience with a mobile device, and it's unfortunate because the genie's out of the bottle, and everybody wants to know where they're at. Their GPS is on, their apps are tracking them. Criminals are accessing their mobile devices to steal their digital lives. And the importance of that specific entity is never realized until we go without it, whether it's due to theft, loss, or damage. So it's a thing now, unfortunately.
It's interesting, isn't it, how easily people are willing to trade privacy for convenience when it comes to technology. And I started falling down this rabbit hole a few years ago. And I saw a lecture by a guy named Daniel Suarez, who was a former IT guy, and now he's a sci-fi author. But he was talking not about sci-fi, he was talking about privacy in the real world and how governments encroach on your privacy in what look like very non-nefarious ways. And the example he gave was some tiny law in the US that was passed, 10, 15 years ago. I can't remember exactly when, but it was related to air pressure monitors in cars, in tires in cars. And it said like, okay, this is a safety bill. We're going to have these little Bluetooth tire pressure sensors. Any new car has to have one. And that will alert you on your dashboard if you've got a flat tire or a low tire. What they didn't tell you is that, obviously you'll know this, of course, but every Bluetooth device has its own unique identifier. So what the US government has since done is that almost every major junction of every major city put out these Bluetooth sniffers who will ping, get your whatever the unique digit is, 1632, 64 digits, whatever it is, back. And then if they know the digit of your tire pressure monitor, they can essentially track you wherever you go across the country. And I remember watching that, and it made me severely paranoid for about several weeks afterwards. And that's just one vector, right? Before we even get into people today, carrying a supercomputer around in their pocket that's got GPS tracking. I think the latest version of the iPhone that came out, or the latest software update, can now track you even if you're got your phone powered off.
Yeah. And Seb, there's a reason why manufacturers begin making their batteries inaccessible to remove them, because even though your device is off, it's still on. You're still being tracked. Your screen just goes dark. Your device isn't on, because if it was truly off, then why does it turn back on when your alarm goes off? Even though you turn your phone off, because it turns back on to turn your alarm on. So your phone is never off. And this is the consequence of the fear of missing out, right? FOMO, right? Where and it's produced by the great Apple, right? The great big company that produces slick, nice devices, which are always 4 to 5 generations behind. And then all of these companies and these CEOs and these presenters, they get on stage and they tout these amazing capabilities and technologies that are now, part of something big. But there's never that discussion in these big presentations about privacy. You see all of these features, right? Look at all these features, and look what this, the A99 can do this now, and so forth. And it's simply misleading to people's own personal sovereignty and expectation of privacy.
I got to ask a serious question off the back of this then. In the news, when you hear about major hacks, it's state actors hacking other governments, or it's hacking collectives, hacking major corporations and doing these data dumps, or it's celebrities being targeted, or high-profile figures. How concerned or how worried should the average person, average Joe, 9-to-5 job, how concerned should they be about privacy and personal security in this current era of technology.
Everyone should have some level of concern when it comes to their own personal level of privacy and security. Unfortunately, in our modern life, we must access the internet and enter our information into some database somewhere for some specific reason, whether or not it's you're paying your water bill or light bill, or you're paying the rent on your flat each month or whatever. You're surrendering little bits of information that ultimately over time becomes metadata. And then these companies, right? These companies that collect this type of information, these little bits of information, these companies sell your information to clearinghouses. And then these clearinghouses begin gathering more metadata and more structure on who you are. Now you don't even need a name associated with your IP address or device MAC address. All you need to do is just continue browsing of interest of things that you find compelling. And those are dead giveaways. It's, everyone does online baking. Everybody goes online for something. It's almost inescapable now to download the app to install on your phone so you can access our service only, right? These privacies are continuing to erode as each new feature is built in by these organizations or these corporations, these tech conglomerates they're baking this stuff in, these new features. So you kind of just forget, right? You just kind of forget about, where's this all going? Because when it's all said and done, it's 5 to 10 years later. And at that point, your data has been mined, sold, resold, brokered, and of course, obtained illegally by threat actors. Yeah. So, and on hackers, right? Specifically speaking of state-sponsored hackers, they are the worst types of hackers to deal with. They are the most aggressive and difficult hackers to catch because they have the blessing of their specific government, and they hide behind their government's veils and firewalls. So those, in a perfect world, the type of hacker that would scare me as a consumer wouldn't be a black hat, right? Or a white hat or red hat, or there's so many colors right now associated with being a hacker. The type of hacker that truly keeps me up at night are the state-sponsored hackers that have, a specific type of qualified immunity for their actions and what their intentions are.
Yeah, they're being endorsed. They're being bankrolled. What's the North Korean one called? Unit 57 or Unit 20? There's a 2-digit number that I forget. And these are people who are delivering a return. From my understanding, my limited understanding, a lot of what they do is delivering a return on investment for their governments. Essentially, they are a revenue generating function. And also another arm of it is, espionage, intelligence gathering, and things like that.
Yeah, especially states like North Korea. North Korea relies almost not 90% on international hacking. And so they train hundreds and hundreds of state-sponsored hackers to steal cryptocurrencies, to steal your identity, and most recently, the past 12 to 24 months, these particular hackers in North Korea, they're obtaining legitimate paying jobs at using artificial intelligence, manipulation. And so it's not specifically North Korea, it's many others. But these are the new tactics of the new era. And so, as technologies continue to advance, so do criminals in the way their tactics evolve.
Yeah. I mean, this is a new Cold War, right? This is the new arms race. It's gone into cyberspace. And you can tell my age there that I'm using the term cyberspace.
Yeah.
You're completely right. I haven't told you this. I don't think I've told anyone this, but a couple of months ago, I was wasn't successful, but subject to a very sophisticated attack. And it was a VC firm, and they replicated the whole website. They created half a dozen social media accounts for various people. They spent months building a relationship with me, and then pivoted to wanting me to be on a podcast that we're launching about innovation. And then at the last minute, fed in this, there's a new video platform that we've invested in, but one of our startups doing, can you download it to do the call because we want to support them? And of course, while you're downloading, luckily I know a little about that. Obviously, like there's absolutely no way of doing that. But I consider myself, not at your level anyway, but in terms of an informed consumer, probably, at the top end of what you would expect an informed consumer to be. And that almost got me. And, what they were after, I had a look at the file afterwards. Obviously, I wanted to dissect it and see what was in it. And it was, it was looking for my Bitcoin wallet, essentially, as if I'd actually have that on my main PC. It was what bowled me over wasn't the technical sophistication. It was the amount of effort that went into it in terms of the social engineering aspect of it. So again, for listeners who aren't too au fait, social engineering is, correct me if I'm wrong here, the part of hacking that isn't necessarily focused on the technical aspect, but it's engineering the human psychology side of it. How do you get people to concede information? Is that correct?
That is correct. And it's very prevalent, and social engineering is the most devastating form of cybercrime out there, because social engineering takes advantage of the human element within technology, and the human element is always will be the weakest link, because most humans don't have that specific amount of training to identify what you almost got hit with. And and those types of sophisticated attacks continue to increase. They're continuing to increase, where, that you will get it where nation states and people that have a specific vested interest in your particular financial situation, they will befriend you. They will become romantically involved with you. They will try to get next to you. They will constantly, they want to be your friend. They're your friend. And they will stop at nothing to get close to you, to get inside of your specific zone of confidence. And it's usually intelligence services from many countries, including the United States, unfortunately, that parlay the tactic of social engineering on so many new levels. It's unbelievable. And I've spoken about that a little bit in the past, but those are some of the, some of the tactics that are used, and they're quite frightening, because you never know who you're dealing with, right? You don't know, and it's always been a ticket of caution in my life of, who is this person? Why are they emailing me? Why do you want to meet me? So forth. And I have foregone hundreds of meetings and interactions with people just on that suspicion alone, and continue to.
Well, this is a good segue, actually, because I was thinking about the other day, you well known within hacking circles, but outside of hacking circles, until the soft white underbelly video I think it was about 5 years ago now, you're relatively unknown outside of those circles. And that went mega viral. I think the last time I checked, it had something like 5.5 million views. I'm guessing at the time you didn't expect that. And as a result of that, did you feel more concerned about your privacy and security, kind of divulging some of the things you did during that interview?
Yeah, there were so many things, and there are still so many things that I am unable to discuss. Yeah, I remember the soft white underbelly video, both of them. And my thought was, maybe I would get, it wasn't to get views. It wasn't for anything else. It was to say goodbye to that person, to who I used to be, right? Because yeah, I've changed in the past 5 years in so many ways. And so it was, for me, it was a way to me to say, hey, this is who I was. This is what I did. Goodbye. Right. And I thought, maybe, I really thought, if maybe a few thousand people hear my story, they would understand. They would understand. But, it went viral. Right. And it really changed my life. So many people came out of the woodwork. I mean, it really altered my life's trajectory. while I've been able to maintain, changing into a different person than who I used to be, it came with so many consequences. I had hundreds of people, and continue, right? It doesn't stop. Hundreds of people, thousands of emails, hey, right, you need to write a book. We'll write a book. You need to hire a ghostwriter. Come invest in our company. Can I have some Bitcoin? Can you come and hack for me? Or blah. There's on the daily, I'm hit with several hundred emails from of sob stories, to request for money for me to invest, and then it's the postings about the internet where there's like I've seen reaction videos where what I've said is it technically feasible, etc. And it's true, right? That when people are subjugated to intense scrutiny, it really alters who you are. And to sit there and watch people, doubt the honest truth of coming out and saying, hey, this is what I've done, and this is who I am. And here's a little advice for your life. It's been very difficult dealing with that, dealing with people that I've assisted in locking up, putting in prison, right? And assisting in apprehending, right? These people are now coming out of prisons and jails and exile. And they're coming out, and now they have a face to put with the person who worked at securing their incarceration. And so it's I've told Mark later a couple of times that it's really I kind of really wish I never had done the interviews, because at that point I was doing Hackers Podcast for 5 years, and now we're going into the 10th year. Shameless plug.
We'll have a link.
And it's really changed my life. I've had government agencies come after me. And when I say come after me, they've, like last year, I had famous hackers, right? People who you, Seb, know, they work for the CIA. Big surprise. Or they work for NSA, or they work for FBI. They're working for IO3. Or they're working for GCHQ or MI6, or, there's so many intelligence sources. And so last year I had to deal with literally the CIA coming at me and just trying to steal my Bitcoin.
Wow.
And it was devastating. It was frightening. It just devastated my perception of security. And so, I had to deal with that. And then I just started living in hotels. And so while I'm in America, that's where I don't live in a home. I don't have, and it's crazy. People think that I live this real fancy, mega billionaire lifestyle. No, I live in hotels and I stay low key because I have to, because it's a risk to my personal safety. So my life has changed over the past 5 years. And as a result of those two interviews, right, I don't grant interviews anymore because, I don't want to write a book yet. When I'm 75 or 80, fine, I'll write a book, or, then I'll tell everything. But so many things that I've done throughout my life and career are still highly classified, and I'm unable to speak on it for another 15 years. So does your life change? Did my life change? Yes. And it's just become more complicated. So it's been tough.
I can't imagine. Like, I'm not well at all. I have a tiny, tiny pocket mini fame, and I already get stressed out by the number of requests for people who want to meet up with me. And it just really grinds me down after a while. And I was talking to my partner about this yesterday, actually, about how I just want to withdraw. Have you ever been, I was going to ask if you regretted the video, but you answered that. Are you ever tempted, obviously you have the level of wealth to do this, but are you ever tempted to, just completely disappear, close all social channels, change your name, just really, really totally disappear, go to South American country or something? It must cross your mind, right?
every day it crosses my mind whether or not I wish to disappear from the world. But I feel like if I disappear, then the people that I've allowed hope to live within their hearts, I feel like I'll take that away from them. And I don't want to do that yet. I've from the writings that people have shared with me, their personal stories of their struggles and their successes. They write to me and I read every email, and they write to me, thanking me for allowing them to give them the inspiration to, to go on with their life, right? To obtain a career in cybersecurity. And so many women, thousands of women have now entered into cybersecurity because of that one video.
Amazing.
And that fucking makes me good. It makes me feel good. And so I'm sticking around for that, virtually. I have backed off of social media quite a lot. I still post poems and photos of flowers and an occasional snippet or quip here and there on the social media platform X, where we've met, but that's the only platform. And I tend to withdraw quite a bit from it when I feel overwhelmed. And that's quite often over the past 24 months, since the new owners have moved in. So I do quite often, think about, just walking away from the world. And I'm backing away this summer from the world, for a little bit. The podcast will still go on, but, yeah, you're, I guess you were feeling that, vibe, because
I cannot imagine. I really can't. So I want to shift tack a little bit. Well, actually, no, I've got one more question on this, and then we'll shift tack a little bit. As a result of those videos, or as a result of what those videos have portrayed you as, what do you think is the most misunderstood aspect of you?
Oh, me telling the truth. It hurts my heart for people to say that I wasn't telling the truth. I mean, why else would I go tell the truth? I mean, that hurts the most when people, they think, for some reason or another that I would make this my life up, or my background up, which, it hurts. It hurts to be called a criminal, right? Because I don't see myself in either of the two dimensions. And so, I don't engage, I just don't engage with hurtful, hateful, negative or deceptive comments about who I am or the accomplishments that I've truly been able to, complete. So, those who know me closely know very well of the accomplishments and who I am, of the accomplishments of what I've been able to do and who I am. And that gives me solace, and understanding that and knowing that people are entering into the field of information technology and learning hacking, especially the girls. That gives me a vast amount of solace. So, yes.
I think they used to say, "Don't feed the trolls" when I was younger. You don't hear that so much in terms of internet haters anymore. But it's definitely one of the older phrases. I know we've had conversations before on technical depth, offline and perhaps I don't want to go into overly technical stuff, but I will say, I know from the conversations we've had, you have an enormous amount of knowledge on specialist subjects. I want to talk a little bit about the early internet and that kind of era, because I do feel that there was a real golden age for hacking. I would say there was a golden age of hacking between kind of the mid-80s to the mid-90s, because that's when I was on the fringes of that community. And there was this, I think the intersection was, for the first time, consumer grade technology hit the level where you could go in and for a few $100s, you could buy, a modem and a computer, a Tandy or whatever, and you could plug that in and dial into a mainframe computer for relatively low cost. And secondly, there's that overlap between this hardware becoming available and kids playing with it, and corporate and wider InfoSec procedures being almost non-existent. And when I look back at some of the stuff I used to play about with, and I'm going to stay deliberately vague here, it was trivially easy compared to the level of security we have today. Corporations have wised up even in the last 20 years, since 2000, 2005, it's so much better than it was. But in the 90s, it really was kind of open season to a certain extent. And, how do you deal with this paradox, or what advice do you have on this paradox, or what I think is a paradox of information security is so much better than it was even 20 years ago, yet we are putting more and more of our lives on the internet, on the cloud. Are we in a better place or a worse place than 20 years ago, do you think?
We're in a far better place than we were 20 years ago because we have more people paying attention to those particular processes. Back then in the mid 80s to mid 90s, there was no security. There was that cybersecurity. That wasn't even, I don't even think that was a word back in those days. And yeah, I can certainly remember the Tandy 1000 TX color computers and the 33.6 baud modems back in the day, which were quite fun it was fun. It was fun to connect to networks back in those days.
I miss the disconnect. There's so many layers of abstraction now between what using a computer and the end thing. Back in those days, you turn the power button on and the prompt just came on instantly. And if you wanted to, tinker with a memory address, you could. It was real fun. A high learning curve, but maybe I'm just being overly nostalgic and I'm just getting old now. But they really felt like there was purity or excitement to it. I don't quite feel with modern technology.
There was, and it was a wonderful time to be in technology because no one had any expectation of people manipulating technology for misuse until the 1986 Computer Fraud and Abuse Act became law in the United States. Only then, that's when after that particular law became effect in 86, afterwards around 88, that's when organizations started hiring, computer security leadership and et cetera. And so it was an afterthought. It was, wow, look at computers, look what they can do. And now people are doing bad things with computers. And so I think, it's obviously apparent that we have, IT professionals and people in the field have been playing catch up ever since, trying to, it's always that cat and mouse game. But, once that genie is out of the bottle, it stays out of the bottle. There must be new ways. There must be new ways to think creatively to combat the existing landscape of threats that continue to emerge every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And that 1986 Act, that's when the FBI started cracking down really hard on what a lot of the time were just teenagers having fun and being teenagers, in the way that they do, just on a new medium. And for any listeners, there's a book I absolutely love called The Gang That Ruled Cyberspace. And this is about kind of online turf war between a Texas and New York-based hacker collective. One was the Masters of Deception and one was the Legion of Doom. And they were just having a teenage pissing contest, really, hacking into all sorts of crazy places. They weren't causing damage. And when this law came into effect, and when, the hackers started entering the public perception in the 80s, right? There were a few Hollywood movies that made these guys the bad guys, even though that's not what hacking is. And I'm going to ask you a little bit about that in a minute. But, you saw these teenagers getting huge prison sentences, and Fiber Optic, back in the day, really, really famous guy, and, a few of the others. And
yeah, he hacked his way right into prison.
Do you think they were done a disservice?
No, I think they created an immense awareness on the possibilities of the potential abuse and outcomes of what can take place in these types of systems, in those types of systems that, hackers like Fiber Optic and many others were compromising. And back then, their curiosity was more than financial. It was more curiosity than financial curiosity or motivation. And so I think they opened so many doors to where we stand now in the cybersecurity domain. All of those people played a significant role in modern cybersecurity, whether they actively understood their future intentions or not. I absolutely think that everyone in, Cult of the Dead Cow, all of these groups, right? They all contributed in a positive manner to our current, existence in computing, cybersecurity. I don't know what to call it anymore, but technology, and I don't know what to call it anymore.
It's constantly evolving. You're right though. These guys created this industry. They started out with curiosity, at times strayed onto the wrong side of the law, but mainly a lot of these guys then, as they stopped being teenagers and grew up, realized there's probably more money to be made legally than illegally from this, and created these huge companies. And I remember chatting to, very briefly online, Lloyd Blankenship once, who wrote the Hackers Manifesto. I think it was published in one of the early crack. And, we were saying that a lot of these kids at the time, they didn't know what was going on in the future. They were just curious, just really curious about exploring these systems and playing about with them. And do you think, what would you just define when you say the term hacker? Because that's evolved over time, right? What is your definition of hacker?
My definition of a hacker is someone who's curious. My definition of a hacker is someone who's infinitely curious and wishes to solve complex problems. I believe that is the true definition of a hacker. Someone who uses their skills to do good things with, to discover something new, to share that knowledge, not just retain it and become some sort of self-inflicted prima donna, but to share that information with others. That is what a hacker does. A hacker shares their information with others so others can learn, and then many more can learn. And then it becomes a thing. It becomes more than an idea or an ideal. It becomes a tangible thing. And so I do believe that calling myself a hacker is appropriate for my intentions, both past, present, and the future. So, it's doesn't mean anything more than just being a curious person who wishes to share information freely and openly without any reservation or monetary foresight.
Is that what keeps you going now? Because, I hope you don't mind me saying it's public knowledge now, but you've got a huge amount of Bitcoin going into billions of dollars. You could be, on a beach sipping pina coladas or whatever. What is it that keeps you going in this industry at the moment? Is it curiosity? Is it, I think you've talked briefly once about wanting to protect victims. What is it that motivates you these days?
I'm always searching for answers. Yeah, I've never stopped searching for answers. Helping people is in solving complex problems. Preventing some asshole hacker or nation state stealing someone's $300 a week paycheck. That's the shit that keeps me going. The plain person who depends on technology transparently. That's what keeps me going. To see families together playing with their children, to see two people in love holding hands and kissing. There's so much that goes into preventing that from not happening, and from doing the right thing, ensuring that people are happy and keeping bad people out of technology. I could go live in a $1 zillion mansion on a beach somewhere and become an asshole, but is that really who I am? And is that my calling? I mean, I don't really like hiding from the NSA or CIA or FBI or many other organizations and living in hotels, but that's a risk. That's my own choosing. I do have places that are away from the world that I normally go to get away from the world, which I'm about to go for a few months. The thing is, people's happiness and people sharing love with the people that they love, that's what keeps me going. Nothing else. Seeing people happy.
That's very, very beautiful. One of the pitfalls of modern technology, we talked about lack of privacy, loss of security. But I think in terms of vulnerable people, it's now given bad actors essentially a tunnel straight into the hand of very, very vulnerable people. There's a story a few months ago now about, I think it was a woman in America who lost a large amount of money because she was talking to an AI video of Brad Pitt. And she got convinced that it was the real Brad Pitt and he wanted to marry her and was in love with her because he'd seen her profile. Now, I don't want to speculate too much on that woman, but I'd say it might be a fair guess. There was some vulnerability there in one form or another. And that's what really angers me, is when you see very, very vulnerable people, especially elderly. Elderly really gets to me. Being exploited by these people, losing their life savings, losing their pensions, and kind of exploiting their lack of technical awareness. And it's just great. There's people like you out there that are kind of fighting a good fight, really, and pushing back. There's a couple of YouTube channels where they kind of bait these scammers. I don't know if you see them, and they do the voice changes.
They are awesome. Yeah, I love those scam baiting channels. I love that.
What a beautiful world we live in, where people can earn ad revenue from doing videos of baiting scammers. I just think that's like that's the good end of technology, right? And how it can be used for social goods.
Indeed. And those are the people who deserve the recognition. Those are absolutely, because they're doing the grunt work. Yes. Yeah.
I think it's great because I don't want to sound too skeptical or too cynical, but a lot of the bigger government agencies that try and raise awareness about this, or charities, I think they have the best intentions at heart, but they're not really doing. I think the people who are doing the most are people like you and people like the YouTube channel who are actively going out there and fighting back against the tide. I want to ask you a little bit about AI. I've tried not to talk about too much about AI in the podcast because everybody's talking about it 24 hours a day at the moment. But how concerned are you about that in terms of, we talked about scamming via kind of digital spoofing of faces and things like that. Are there any other attack vectors with AI that we should know about or be concerned about?
Oh my God, every attack vector is becoming an artificial intelligence driven scenario. Yeah, I believe we should be worried about all types of AI in the hands of criminals. And that is a significant problem that's continuing to evolve. Even as we speak, there's a criminal somewhere right now discovering some new vector that they can incorporate AI into. It's significantly worrisome as, leaders of organizations are spoofed, right? To, contact other leaderships within their organization for financial gain, or for romance scams, or for interpersonal theft. Celebrities, celebrities are highly susceptible to this type of technology and its misuse. As had several celebrities reach out to me asking, how can they prevent, a threat actor from using their likeness with AI? And the shorter order answer is currently you cannot, because there's no technology that can differentiate between AI generated video, audio, and then real world. And so that's the unfortunate answer these days that I've been giving, some of my clients, because, when you're famous, you're making videos, you're making, you've got sound bites, and all AI needs is the 0.5 of a second to, recreate who you are and your personality.
Yeah.
So, the misuse of AI by criminals is becoming unfortunately is becoming more of a mainstream scenario, and traditional levels of computing and foresight with security intertwined is becoming less secure because of artificial intelligence. So it's a very significant issue. And yeah, it's been the latest buzzword because you've got specific CEOs on stage, touting their latest 5,005 XXX processor. And so this drives, it's driving innovation, but it's also driving crime. Yeah. And so AI is going to get.
I'm getting flashbacks of, again, I'm showing my age, but when you get executives standing on stage talking about the information superhighway or Web 2.0, they really go with these buzzwords. They love them. And I think the truth is nobody yet fully understands the implications of where this is going to go. We can take guesses and try and extrapolate the line forward. But if technology teaches us anything, is that it's incredibly hard to predict in what direction it's going to go and how it's going to change over the next 10 years. There was another story that I saw relatively recently about an executive who got scammed. And they were on a Zoom call and they AI spoofed the entire board or several members of the board. And I think he transferred something like $26 million because, he had the CEO and the CFO on the call being like, yeah, we authorize this. And yeah, it's crazy. If there's any enterprising founders listening, maybe we need some kind of video stream encryption that embeds some kind of cryptographic hash into digital files. And then, when Zoom picks it up, it has a plugin that can verify that this is an authorized celebrity feed or something through the embedded digital watermark on the pixels. I don't know. But I'm sure it's an arms race, right? The AI's here. We're the first people in any new technology you take advantage of it tend to be the hackers, whether they're nefarious or not. And then it takes private industry a little bit of lag time to come up with countermeasures. That's my experience of it. So I think we're in that early part where the tinkerers, good and bad, are finding these things with AI. And, I think within another year or two, we're going to start to see the first big security products come out. But who knows? It's going to be exciting.
It is, and it's an exciting time to bear witness to the transformation of technological computing and its divergence into our everyday lives. And for any thought leaders or organizational leaderships that are tuned into your podcast, all they really have to do to prevent AI impersonations is to call together a meeting in person with your leader, with other leaders in your organization, and then share a unique password that leaders use amongst themselves, and ensure, just like a computer password, ensure that password rotates each month. And so when that occurs, leadership will ask amongst themselves, well, hey, what's the password? And if the criminal cannot produce the password, then there it is. And so very simple, common sense will, really, throw that in a shitter, right? Because all you have to do is just create a password, within, even in your family, you should create a password, because, threat actors are contacting a family member saying that they're stuck somewhere and that wire them some money. And then, then what, So create a password amongst people that you trust to ensure that they are who they say they are.
I think it's really good advice. I think it's interesting that as the technology gets more and more sophisticated, sometimes some of the older methods are the best. And what you described there reminds me of the old spy movies, where two agents would meet up and not know each other. So they have this exchange, like the flowers in Moscow are bright this spring or something. And it would be the code word and they would reply. And you're so right. I think we're going to see more and more at first, particularly with audio. Like we've had spam dialers for decades, but I think we're about to see spam dialers on steroids, impersonating all kinds. Because I don't want to sound horrible, but like for me, big red flag sometimes when you get these spam calls is a lot of these spam call centers are based in India, right? So if it's an Indian accent or a Bangladeshi accent, It's a bit, not always, but it can be a red flag. But I think we're going to get super sophisticated AI voice cloning. I think we're already here with it, but I think we're going to see it applied more and more. And I think you're absolutely right. Going back to having a pre-agreed. So we've only got about 5 minutes left, and it pains me how quickly these interviews go sometimes, because I could easily talk to you for hours about some of this stuff. In the time we've got left, I want to shift away from hacking a little bit. And I want to talk to you about something I've seen you tweet about a lot over the last year or so. And we've had a couple of conversations on it, which is quantum computing. And I've seen you, while not going into it perhaps as a full-on career, I've seen you become more interested in it and tweeting about it a bit more. Could you tell us a little bit about why it piques your interest and how confident you are, what potential this has to be the next big thing?
Sure. Well, I knew that question would come sooner or later. What piques my interest in quantum computing is quantum mechanics. I've always been fascinated with the concept of time travel. I've always been fascinated with, ever since my mom died in 1985, I've always had that fascination of, going back just to see my mom for one more day. And so I entered the field through that specific vector of curiosity. And then it's the philosophy and the understanding of the science in the quantum universe. Understanding, it's fascinating. It's just fascinating to me, coming from a logical background, linear logical computing background in life, where now in the quantum realm, there's new states of matter, there's new states of dimension, there's new states of computing within the matter that contains these dimensions. And I find that extraordinarily fascinating, knowing that computations and calculations don't take time. They take presence, and they have a state of being rather than a state of linear reality. Knowing that I can solve a complicated mathematical problem that would take classical computers millions and trillions of years. In the quantum computing world, it takes a fraction of a second, because the states of matter are in two places at once. And so understanding the coherence between these two states of matter, to get those two states of matter to a display with a keyboard and a mouse, as we've known traditionally, is quite a considerable challenge. There's many companies out there at the forefront. Google, Microsoft are paving their own path in quantum computing. And it's extraordinarily fascinating. And God, I wish I could be part of some of those teams. But I'm learning at my own pace, as I've always have, self-taught as I've always been. And so I find it fascinating that eventually, in the not so distant future, I will be able to go onto the Internet Archive and download that encrypted file that someone had uploaded, and then decrypt it and see what was in it. Yeah, see what it was all about. Because there's so much content that I'm curious to see what it's all about. So having that type of power and knowledge, to me, is crucial to being able to share that when I'm ready to, when I'm really ready to retire as a person, not just a hacker. And so I believe that quantum computing has extraordinary benefits for our future and our lives. Quantum computing will find new drugs that we haven't even thought about yet. It will in the fields of medicine and in construction and in our everyday in finance, right? I believe that there's a new reality that awaits us beyond, what we're so used to in a classical computing world. So, without getting too technical, I hope that kind of rounds it out.
It's fascinating. I barely barely understand it. Like I scratched the surface, some of the pop sci-fi books on it, and the concept of time is fascinating. I thank you, by the way, for such a really personal answer. I thought you were going to talk about breaking encryption or something, but that was a really lovely answer. And you're right. There's Microsoft recent. I'm going to forget the name of this. Was it Majorana 1, the quantum chip that they announced about a month or two ago? And again, these things are still, these companies, what they're producing, my understanding is that at present, these are glorified toys. Essentially, it's a few qubits of power, but it's not, if you go on the assumption that computing power will double every 18 months, which it has for the last 40 years, it's not going to be that long before these toy examples have enough processing power to instantly break any traditional methods of encryption we have. I think that's right. Does that worry you about like Bitcoin and crypto, that system could collapse once quantum chips, quantum computers get powerful enough?
It does not concern me with existing cryptocurrencies in the world, as Bitcoin has a stable of wonderful developers who are absolutely keen to and ready, if not overzealous, to employ lattice-based encryption, which would secure the Bitcoin ecosystem. And I'm sure other developers with other ecosystems are thinking along the same lines. I think cryptocurrencies in the future will be quite well off and stable. It's the algorithms that protect them. And currently, you have secure hash algorithm that's protecting, ecosystems in the cryptographic world. And so that'll continue. That there'll be an upgrade to these blockchains that are secured with traditional encryption. But in the future, yes, the blockchains will absolutely employ lattice-based encryption, which will resist quantum attacks. Because when you're attacking a blockchain type of technology, you're attacking its core foundation, and so it'll be fine. Bitcoin will be fine. Ethereum would be fine. All of the others, there's thousands of them. They'll all be fine. It's the ecosystems that choose not to employ that type of technology in the future, where threat actors and criminals are able to divest their knowledge with quantum computing. And to back up just a little bit on quantum computing, these companies, the limitations that these companies are having are the limitations that everyone is having, which is in quantum computing, the slightest vibration can cause chaos. And vibrations, noise are the two biggest problems with quantum computing. And how do we isolate that? How do we isolate the vibrations? I've blown so many processors, and I've burned myself cryogenically. So that is the bottleneck, right? Is reducing the interference from outside elements and from within its own element. That is what, that is the holy grail, not the holy grail, but that's the end game for quantum to become reality. I believe we're at around 12 to 24 qubits at the high end, where we're talking about, the NSA and Utah using it, in that particular manner. But I believe NSA and Utah, they're setting at about 42 to 48 qubits. So it's becoming a thing. I shouldn't have divulged that, but I don't give a fuck. And, it's going to become more of a mainstream practice. But in the future, our lives will be inherently more secure with quantum computing, as there's no traditional cybersecurity threats as they currently exist now as to where they will be in the future with quantum. And so that's an exciting place to be in the future, where you don't have to worry about the criminal hacking your system or stealing your data, because there'll be, with quantum, there is no theft. There is none of that. It doesn't exist. And so there's much to look forward to with that particular state of computing. And we need more people. We need many more people to enter into the field to help solve these complex problems, because traditional computers will not solve quantum computing problems, our imaginations will. And so that's what my hope is for many people to continue to enter into the field to solve these particular problems that currently exist.
Amazing. We said 5 minutes ago, we don't know where technology is going to go with AI. I think when you add quantum to the mix, it's going to be an extremely interesting 20 years coming up. Like everything, there's going to be an arms race. Technology inherently is neutral. Whether you apply it for good or bad depends on the type of person you are. So there's going to be an arms race in the applications of AI and quantum between those two different types of people. But hopefully that will end in an overall better place for everyone as things get stronger, more robust. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I wish I could talk to you for hours, but I'm going to have to draw it to a close there because we've come to time. Enormous thank you. If listeners are interested in hearing more from Gummo, there's obviously the two famous software underbelly interviews. There's also, of course, Gummo's podcast, Hackers XXX, which I think is now on your NetherRain portal. Obviously, we'll put a link in that. Hundreds of hours of great content. I'm a frequent listener. And anything else you want to mention? Any projects you're working on? Any projects that you have friends that are working on that aren't getting enough exposure that you want to give a shout out to? Anything at all in this last minute or two?
No, I thank you for the opportunity, but I choose not to lay bias onto myself or to others, but I do wish everyone the very best with their projects and their aspirations. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you as well for luring me out of the woods for this interview. It's been 3 years. And so it's been good to get a few things off my chest and tell the truth once again. So yes, thank you for having me.
The pleasure's been all mine. Thank you so much, Gummo. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, sir.